The next piece we need for our transactions view is view model. Let's go ahead and create transactions view model. And also we will need wallet controller in order to display the transactions we have. So now in this case you can see how having a special class to deal with fetching the data comes in handy. Now we can just call the same controller we have used in the wallet view model to get the transactions. If we have put the logic for getting the transaction in the wallet view model, now we would have to duplicate the same code, which is bad. This transaction model inherits from base view model, and let's create the constructor, and in our override initialize async we are going to call the wallet controller to populate the list of transactions. So what we can do is to call var transaction is get me from wallet controller get transactions. This has to be async. Okay, we need a couple of properties, so let's define all of these properties in the view model. Now we can initialize and populate our transactions. So let's first set transactions to be new observable collection of transactions. Then once we get the transactions, let's populate the property with those transactions. And in our transactions view, we need to set the binding context to be equal to the transactions view model. So let's resolve this to transactions view model. And on appearing, what we want is to call the initialize async method of the transactions view model so that we get the data. So our binding context, we will cast that to the transactions view model and then initialize async. For now, let's just have it empty. And let's set is refreshing at the start to be true. And once we get and populate the transaction, we will set navigate is refreshing to false. Let's see the result. So we have all transactions now. What's left to do is to populate both deposited and withdrawn transactions. The logic for getting deposited and withdrawn transactions is almost the same. So what we can do is to reuse the transactions view model and set it to binding context to both deposited transactions view and withdrawn transactions view. The only change we are going to make is that we will pass different parameters to the initialize async based on whether we are using transactions view model in the transactions view or deposit transactions view or withdrawn transactions view. And this parameter will determine the filter we are going to apply to the transactions we load from the wallet controller. In the transactions view, this filter will be empty string, meaning that we don't filter by transaction status. And let's set the binding context for deposit and transactions view. So it's the same. The only change is that we will use constants and say in deposit and transactions view, we only want deposited transactions. And if we go to the withdrawn transactions view, in this case, we only want withdrawn transactions. So let's store and implement the filtering functionality. I need a string to store filter. At the start, this will be just empty string. In initialize async, we get that string from parameter. So parameter to string. And what we can do is to perform extract method refactoring on this block of code. Let's call this new method get transactions and filter out the transactions we get from the wallet controller in this method. So if the filter is not empty, meaning that we are in deposited or withdrawn transactions view, then what we would like to do is to take the transactions. Then what we would like to is perform some filtering using where from system link, and we want to get only the transactions which have status equal to our filter. We need to cast this back to list. The reason I have put this in a new method is that we can now reuse the same code for getting and refreshing the transactions property in the refresh transactions command. So once we pull to refresh, we will also perform the same method. What's missing here is that we need to slightly change the data we are getting from the controller. So we only have at the moment deposited transactions, but let's go and also create one withdrawn transaction so that we can see our change. One change I'm missing is for setting binding context to both withdrawn and deposited transactions. And now let's see the change. Okay, all transactions now shows all transactions. Deposited shows only deposited transactions, and withdrawn only shows the withdrawn transactions. One other change I have missed is that I need to change the source of my image in the wallet controller. So instead of transaction deposited image, here I need to set transaction withdrawn image. And now this is also fine.